welfare is no longer fair. This is not a little video about the etymology of those two words, fair, F-A-R-E, and fair, F-A-I-R, but a recognition of how unfair our current system has become on those who work and pay for it. Bear in mind, as a starting point, as a fundamental truth, there is no money for the state other than taxation. Those who work provide the money for everything that the state does, whether this is defence, or it's the police, the National Health Service, or the welfare state. Now, when you take defence and the police and the National Health Service, taxpayers benefit from that themselves. To some extent, it's an insurance policy. There is a quid pro quo for what they pay in and what they receive in return. But what people pay in for non-pension welfare is not in that category. It is a transfer from one group of people to another group of people. And it needs to be fundamentally fair to be justifiable. So what is fair? Well, in a civilized country, there is a desire, a worthy and good desire, to ensure that people who cannot look after themselves are looked after in some way. And this country has a very long history of doing this. If you go back to the Middle Ages, the monasteries provided the basis of welfare in this country. They would provide some support for those who were infirm, who were disabled in whatever way, or who had been injured in their work. They were also, of course, great sources of work themselves. They would provide doles, they would provide some food for the poor. When the monasteries were dissolved, there was a terrible period without any support, which was ultimately replaced by the Poor Laws, which came in 1601 at the very end of the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, which remained the basis of welfare until the 19th century, and it was very much a parish-based system. Local authorities were responsible for looking after people. This evolved until, of course, the Beveridge reforms in the 1940s after the Second World War. And Beveridge was not a Labour supporter, he was a Liberal, and his plans had broad acceptance across the political parties that there ought to be support to help people, to ensure that people in this country did not live in absolute poverty. But in recent years that has changed, and welfare has reached a point where it has become a lifestyle choice rather than being the necessary support for those otherwise facing hardship. And it is paid for by people who are only just above the welfare threshold, and some people who pay for it are actually worse off than those who are on benefits. This is the bit that is not fair. It's also a disincentive to work. We saw recent figures that showed that 4 million people are under no obligation to look for work. We've seen the numbers on PIP go up by 1 million. We've seen unemployment begin to rise, partly because of decisions made by this government that have made it harder for people to find jobs. This welfare is paid for by those who remain in jobs. And at the budget, we are hearing rumours that they will be squeezed further. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about income tax thresholds. It is suggested that income tax thresholds, which are already frozen until 2027-28, will be frozen for an extended period, while at the same time, those on benefits will get a 3.8% increase in their benefits so that they remain flat in inflationary terms. What this means is that the people paying for the benefits will be made worse off, while the people receiving the benefits will maintain exactly their same standing in real terms. That's what I mean by unfair. We've already seen, by the freezing of the threshold, a cost to people in work of hundreds of pounds a year, people on the higher rate running into thousands of pounds a year. This is very unreasonable. It's unfair that they should be penalised, particularly as the higher rate draws more and more people into it who are in no sense particularly well off, so that those who aren't working should maintain exactly the same level. Surely we should all be in this together, and if thresholds are frozen, then benefits ought to be frozen too. There is also a discussion about the two-child policy. Now, you may think someone with 6 children has no right to say whether or not benefits should be applied to other families. But it seems to me that when people in work cannot afford to have 2 children, let alone more than 2 children, it is unfair that they should be paying for people out of work to have more children. What I think we need is a fundamental reassessment of family policy so that we encourage children to be born to all families, because currently the tax system and the benefit system encourages you only to have children if you're on benefits. Anyone who is working is heavily penalised for having children. The costs are extremely high and the support for it is absolutely non-existent, and it's part of the reason why the birth rate is so low. But that what is absolutely unreasonable is for there to be no support for taxpayers with children and yet to give further support to people who have children and are on benefits. It's just not reasonable on those who are paying the taxes. And the cost is huge. 2 things I've been talking about, the 3.8% increase for people on benefits, coupled with the proposal to abolish the 2-child limit, is £9 billion. And those who pay for it are going to be whacked not only by a freezing of the thresholds, but also by duties going up in line with inflation, and not just in line with the CPI, but normally in line with the retail price index. So that'll hit people who are working, who smoke, or who drink, or who drive cars, because we hear that the fuel rate may be increased again, having been frozen for many years. This is a fundamental issue of fairness. And it's always the left that thinks it's got the monopoly on fairness. It wants to reduce inequality. Well, yes, but you don't reduce inequality in any sensible way by making everybody poorer. We need to make the whole country richer. And to do that, we need to incentivize work over benefits. We need to ensure that those people work who are early in their careers, who aren't necessarily high earners, have an opportunity to improve themselves, to improve the standard of living for their families over and above those who are on benefits. That is fair. Welfare must be fair. Currently it isn't. It needs to be changed. We cannot afford to live on other people's money. As always, thank you for watching.